Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. Sorry it's a little bit late. I was just waiting for a few more attendees to join us. So today we are going to be looking into our Nebula platform, specifically the new update, which is 2.0. So it's like a revamp of the user interface. So for any of you that have joined us that don't know what Nebula is our cloud management platform where you can manage your gateways, your switches, and your access point all in one pane of glass. And you can also manage multiple organizations and multiple sites, making it very appealing for the sort of SMB model that you're probably utilizing in your industry at the moment. It's not going to be a sort of traditional webinar that I've done in the past with a sort of presentation. It is going to be a live sort of demonstration and showing you the portal as well. So feel free to post any questions, and at the end we will go through the questions. Any I can answer online I will do, any I can I will then take offline and approach you individually to answer those questions. So first thing is Nebula is accessible on any web browser. There is also an app available as well for certain changes that you might want to do and for monitoring purposes. So to get started, you open up a web browser and go to nebula.zyzel.com. You're then presented with this web page here, and then you click on the Get Started button. So at this stage, you'll then be offered to either log in, you can sign up, forget password, and you'll see that there's an experience, a live demonstration. So this is a live site in Nebula, which we use as a demonstration platform. So you can navigate around it, you can see it in its live environment, and you can sort of play around with the interface to your liking. So in order to do this, put in the details, Nebula@zyzel.com as the account, and the password is Nebula Demo. If you click login, it will then take you into the next stages. Now, there are two elements to Nebula. There is Nebula Control Center, which is what we're going to be covering today, and there's also Nebula Orchestrator, which is specifically for our VPN series and covers SD-WAN. If you need to know any more about that, we do have a catalogue of previous webinars run on that, and I'm more than happy to discuss them on a one-to-one basis as well. So to get started, go to Nebula Control Center and click on the Go button. So if you've used Nebula before, you'll be used to this screen. This is the old dashboard. So this is like version 1.0. To try the new one, at the top right hand corner, you'll see Try New Nebula, and you'll see that it is a beta release at the moment. So there may be certain things that need improving from a research and development point of view, and we do take feedback from our customers very seriously. So if you do notice anything which is a little bit out of whack, which needs sorting, then just raise a ticket with the support team and they'll be able to escalate that for you. So to try the new Nebula, click on the button in the top right hand corner. It will come up with this notification providing you some information about what features it's got included in it, and the fact of when we find a problem, they obviously put a list of certain things which have been highlighted on here already. So when you're ready to go ahead, step into the future beta, which will then take you to the new user interface. So once it loads up, you'll see that it's got a completely different look. So rather than the usual sort of black background and the options across the top, you'll see that it's now a white background, and these indications on here are sort of widgets, so you can customize these. So if you click on the customize on the top right hand corner, you can move them around. You can also choose which ones you want to show, which ones you don't, so you can make it either as technical and detailed as you like, or you can make it very plain and simple. So if you don't obviously have any gateways, you can take the gateway elements off there, so you can just manage your access points. The same with your switches and your access points. So as you can see on here, you do have certain information such as like the PoE power, the gateway details, so any sort of applications that are being used and what devices are using them, what sort of operating systems are currently using it. So it's got all the sort of details that you would expect on there. One thing that has been added is the actual map. So this is a map which you could have uploaded into the device, and then you can actually plot the access points and the switches physically in the location that they're at. So this is a new thing which has been added to the dashboard. So at the top, you've got the organizations that you can select from. From here, you can create an organization, or you can select like the one that I am on at the moment. To the right-hand side, you've got the sites. So for an organization can have multiple sites. So all of these can be selected. And as you can see, it does change the screen depending on what site you're at. The good thing is about this, if you're on a specific section of Nebula and you switch to go to a different site, it will maintain being on the same screen, but for the different site. So you can do a quick comparison between sites as well. So if we go down the options, as I say, usually the options are across the top side of it, whereas now they're down the left-hand side. So you've got the MSP portal. Because it's a multi-tier platform, you've got the MSP portal, and then underneath that you'll have the organizations, and then underneath the organizations you have each of the individual sites. So as I say, this is aimed not only for sort of end users to manage their equipment or resellers, but if you're a managed service provider, then you can obviously have a good view of everything that you're looking at. So you can have a look at how many devices you've got for the entire organization, to how many sites, how many sort of offline, how many are in a sort of error state, and a number of the specific devices that you've actually got. You also have the ability to change licenses as well from an organization to a different organization as well. So you can specify and move either your NCC points across or your NSS points across, depending what you've got. Okay, so that's the MSP side of things. On the left-hand side again, if we go down to organization-wide, this is where you get all of your organization options. So from here, you can do a quick overview. So it'll show you a list of all your sites. It will show you usage, how many clients, any specific tags you've got, the generic site health. So as you can see, you can hover over it. It gives you an online time in a percentage, and it also specifies certain events which may have occurred between a certain time. So this could have been when the site went offline for whatever reason. It'll show you how many devices you've got and how many are offline, and a percentage of your offline devices as well. If you do have the Pro Pack, you can export this information to either CSV or XML as well. You will notice that these options here, which have a little diamond next to it, this does indicate that it is a Pro feature, so it does require a license in order to use these facilities. So the changelog is specific to anything which is changed on the actual Nebula platform for traceability purposes, and what actually happens with your site. So you can see specific devices going offline on a specific site, and you can also go from older to new, and you can do it as a specific range, or you can have a look at anything before a certain date in case you've been experiencing certain issues. From here, you've got the so at the top section of any of the menus, you'll have monitor, which is where you monitor the specific either organization, or you will monitor the individual sites, or you'll monitor or the monitoring ability for the security gateway, the switch, and the access point. And then underneath that are the configuration options. So for the organization, for instance, you've got settings. So you can go into here, you can name your organization, you can specify an idle timeout on your web browser so it doesn't kick you out. You can also specify a login IP ranges to be able to lock it down so that you can only access it from certain IP addresses. Import any certificates you may be using, and you can delete the organization. So it is key to note that you can't delete an organization unless there's no devices assigned to the site, no licenses, no users, no administrators, and then once you've deleted the site, you can then delete the organization. So there is a safety mechanism there to make sure that you can't delete anything which has active devices on it which have been applied to it. So you've got the peace of mind that nobody can go in, potentially somebody who's new, and actually delete anything. So create a site is what it says. So you can pretty much just create a site. So you'll first off by putting a name in it. And if you've got the Pro version, you can do a clone from a specific site, or you can bind it from a specific template you may have created. Specify the local time zone, because obviously different sites might be in different countries. The inventory will show you an inventory across all of your sites. So again, this is an organization-wide settings. So you'll see the MAC address, the serial number, the model, when it was registered and what country, and then it will tell you what specific site it is on. From here, you can tick it and unregister it as long as it's been removed from the site first. Once you do unregister it, the device itself will get a reset command and go back into its factory default status. Again, ProPack version, you can export all this information to CSV or XML file. So license management comes in pretty handy. So you can see the status of all your licenses, and you can also run a calculation as well to find out how many points you want when you want a specific co-termination date. So you can specify a co-termination date. It will then calculate how many points you need, and then you will go to your relevant distributor, say you want the so many points, and then it'll obviously provide you a co-termination date that is specified on here. And it does that for both the NTC license, which is for the Nebula Control Center, so like the ProPack features, and the Nebula Security Services, which sits with the NSG range. So the calculations work for both of them, and it gives you a good view of how many devices you've got and how many points you've got as well, and when your termination date will be. Administrators, so you can add specific administrators to organizations, to specific sites. So this is quite handy from my point of view. If I have a customer who's potentially having a few issues or needs a bit of guidance, they can provide me access to their site, and then I can access it from my login screen. So when you choose your organization, one will appear for the one that you've been given access to. So it does come in quite handy for supporting any customers, or being able to even provide the end users access to their own site so they can make certain changes, but you'll still be offering a managed service on that as well. The cloud authentication, so this section is obviously what's been in there before. So these are like a login accounts for guests. So this could be Captive Portal, or anything such as that. You've also got VPN users you can create, and also you can add MAC addresses for MAC authentication as well when you set that up on the wireless side of things. You've got the configuration management and the configuration templates. So this is where you will go through and sort of build your configuration templates. You can do a backup and restore, and you can also clone certain settings from certain switches that you've got as well. So you can clone device settings from this 1920 to any other of the same model switches which you may have in the site. So it really does make deploying it much easier, which is the aim of Nebula. The backup and restore. So this is more like a snapshot, so you can actually back it up before you make any changes, so that if you do make any changes and it breaks it, then you've got that peace of mind that you can actually roll back and get it back up and running pretty quickly. So the configuration templates, so these can be done so that when you do create a site, you can select a specific template. Again, this is a pro version, and this is in a beta area as well. So if you do it, just make sure you check all the settings to make sure that they do replicate across correctly. And if you need any guidance on creating the templates, then feel free to sort of give us a call, give the support guys a call. They'll be more than happy to help you. So the VPN members is just a case of being able to visually see any potential VPN users you've got connected to any specific sites, and it also shows you here what subnets they're on and what the sort of status are of the NSGs as well. So moving on to the sort of site settings, so you've got the site dashboard, which is what we saw earlier on. You've got a quick summary report, so you can have a look at WAN usage, you can have a look at top devices, top SSIDs, top switches by power usage. So as you can see, it's quite visually nice to be able to have a look at this sort of information. You've got the map and floor plan, so this is where you can actually import a floor map, and you can actually pinpoint certain devices in a certain area. You can even take pictures and assign them to that specific device. So if you're sat behind a desk guiding one of your on-site engineers to the access point, you can specifically pinpoint them in exactly the location where it is, and even review the picture as well to see where it's physically mounted. A lot of my customers use this quite heavily because it does come in handy when you've got potential like junior engineers and things like that on site. So you can edit the floor plan, and then you can create one and put it in. Again, if you need any assistance with this, just feel free to reach out to us. One of the best features I find about Nebula with the Pro version is the network topology. It will actually build up a topology based on what devices you've got. It knows what switch it goes into, what port it goes into, and it will show you the physical status of it. So if, for instance, you've got an engineer who goes on site and goes, right, this particular access point isn't working, you can see that because this would be red. You can then click on it and it will actually tell you the status of it, and which you've got a link that you can go straight to the device. It also tells you what remote port you're in. Now, this remote port refers to the switch. So that access point there is in port 8 on the IT room switch. So it means that you can actually indicate to the on-site engineer, go, right, that access point's offline. It's meant to be plugged into port 8, port 5, port 3 in the switch. Go and interrogate the switch and have a look at the port status, see if there's any lights on it, see if the cable's plugged in, and really help you drill down and get it back on and working. On the configuration side, there's not much to the site settings. So you've got the general settings, so site name, local time zone, the local credentials. This is quite important. A lot of people forget this, but when you actually onboard the Nebula devices into the platform, it changes the default password, which is like admin1234 or admin and admin. So whatever the password is, even if you've changed it, when you onboard it, it overrides it and it provides it with this password here. So if you want to try and get onto the local interface, you need to come into here and make sure you've got the password that it's provided. By default, it will provide a random one, which has been automatically generated, but you can overtype this and provide it with your own so that when it onboards onto Nebula, it provides it with your password that you want to specify. So on here, you can set about your captive portal re-authentication. So on a captive portal, how often you want people to be kicked back to the login screen. SNMP access, you can set up a syslog server, and you can also specify the firmware upgrades as well for the specific devices at specific days. You've got your alert settings. So for a Pro Pack, you can set up email alerts or in-app push notifications. You can select multiple email addresses as well. You can have manually type it or select it from a list of the administrators that are already on here. And then you can specify which devices will send you an email. And one of the ones that I quite like is the DHCP lease pool is exhausted. This is quite a good one because a lot of people, if they've got quite a lot of people coming in and out and they've only got a small DHCP pool, it can quite easily run out of IP addresses. So it will actually send you an email saying your DHCP lease pool is exhausted, so you can have a look at increasing it, or you can look at deleting all the leases. You can add a device, so that is what it says. You can add a device to the specific device. Because obviously this is a demo site, I can't actually add one to it, but it is just a case of going and either registering it, where you're putting the serial number and username, it'll register it to your device and then assign it to the site. Or if it's already registered and it just needs allocating, you can then add it to this site. You've got your firmware management. So a bit more granular detail than what on the previous screen. So you can specify all the access points will upgrade at certain times, and you can have a look and force upgrades as well to any of the devices listed at the bottom. So again, it's good to know that you can actually schedule your firmware upgrades, but I know some people are quite hesitant for upgrading them straight away. So you could actually specify no schedule and then manually do that. Cloud authentication is similar to the, is the same as the cloud authentication I showed you at the organization side of things. It's just multiple avenues to get to it. So on the security gateway, again, you've got all the monitoring side of things, and you've got all the configuration. So we'll skip through the monitoring because they are pretty much the same as what's in the main Nebula. So you've got your event viewer, what clients are online, and your NSS analysis report, which is for like your antivirus, your content filtering, statistics. So on the security gateway, if you go into configuring IP, interface addressing, this is where you set up your LAN connectivity, your VLANs, your subnetting, and any sort of priority on there as well, any static routes or any dynamic DNSs you want to set up on there as well. Policy routes are being able to point certain traffic down certain interfaces. So you can specify over WAN or WAN 2, so you can split the traffic. You can then VoIP traffic down your most stable fiber line, and have data going through potentially an ADSL line of some sort of nature. So just being able to tell the traffic where you want it to go. So for internet traffic, the next hop is selectable as one of your interfaces. And for intranet traffic, you can specifically point it to a different IP address. So if you've got quite a complicated network and you need a bit of a complicated policy route, you can specify the next hop manually. And again, you can put all your source IP, your destination IP, and the ports as well in there. So firewall settings, so being able to block ports inbound, and specify if you want ping to be able to respond, things like that. So more about securing your device like any other firewall UTM that you would use. Same sort of principle. So application patrol, so being able to create profiles to block certain categories, certain applications. So if you go to ADI, give it a name, you give it a description, you can turn on the login, and you can specify that you want to block peer-to-peer networks, you want to block VoIP services. You can either drop it, reject it, or forward it. So if you forward it, obviously it's going to allow them to use it, but the key for this is making sure that you got login on, because then you can actually see that people are using instant messaging. Then you can put it into your company policy that you're not allowed to use it during work times or whatever. You can schedule these profiles as well, and then being able to specify NAT, so either do a one-to-one NAT or virtual server. So port forwarding, if you've got a web server internally, an FTP server, or an FTP document repository that you want to remote into from a remote location, this is where you would set it up. So the security services pro feature. So on here you have the content filtering, which has now been enhanced so that you can do content filtering per interface. So that's not just physical interface, but virtual interfaces as well, which this is only available on the newer version. So if you're still using the older version, you won't get this sort of option. So you can specify a block list, a whitelist, a redirection URL. So if you hit it, it'll redirect them to potentially the company policy. You can specify certain block categories. So this, again, is pulled from a database, a centralized database that all the units have. You can turn on the antivirus, and you can specify a specific blacklist or whitelist for the actual file. So you could, for instance, do a .pdf as a whitelist because you don't want it to analyze it. And then for a blacklist, for instance, you might want to always specify .zip or .rar in there. And then by default, intrusion detection and prevention is turned on. So from the switch point of view, again, you've got the monitoring side of things, so clients, event views, and being able to monitor the actual performance of your switch. And then you've also got the same options, not a lot of change between two versions in regards to this. You've got the switch ports, so you can specify the individual settings for the actual ports themselves. So you can turn on rapid spanning tree, LLDP, PoE, set up the PoE scheduling, port isolation, bandwidth control. So you can specify that port can only transfer so much data. You got loop guard, storm control as well, which have a look at these sort of statistics here, and it will actually shut the port down if it detects like a storm, a broadcast storm on that port. And then you've got your type of port, so whether it be a trunk port or an access port, and specify what PVID would be tagged and what VLANs are allowed. So by default, the switch will carry all VLANs, so there's very little configuration needs to be done unless you're trying to lock it down a little bit further. So also on the switch, you've got IP filtering, so being able to customize rules based on IP address, source ports, and VLANs. So by default, the default rule is to allow everything, but you can start blocking stuff and disabling things as well. And you'll see that they do give you the Nebula Control Center IP addresses as well. So ultimately, it's a case of not blocking them. Advanced IGMP, so this is where you would set up IGMP snooping for IP television. It's got all the settings that you would expect, and it works pretty well with these switches as well. So if you are using IGMP in any situations, this is where you'll want to come to use it. Again, take note of the diamond, it is a pro feature that is required for this. So you've got radius policies where you can specify MAC-based authentication and set up any specific radius service for that switch. You've got PoE schedules, being able to schedule when PoE is turned on and turned off, and then you've got the overall switch settings as well. So any specific management ID, whether you want spanning tree turned on, quality service, port mirroring, which comes in handy for diagnostics when you've got Wireshark account and potentially having a look into potential broadcast storms. Voice VLAN, which is a pretty handy feature, so you can specify the like the first 6 octets of your MAC address of a VoIP provider, so Yealink or Polycom. Then what it will do is, if any of them devices join the network, they'll automatically be tagged with a specific VLAN, and then you can give it a specific priority as well, 6 being the highest priority, 1 being the lowest priority. That comes in handy, especially if you're using computers that plug into the network pass-through on the back of the phone, because what that will allow is the phone will get dropped into the voice VLAN with the correct priority, yet the PC, even though it's connected through the phone, because it's not part of the same MAC address, so it's not like a Yealink or a Polycom device, it will physically get dropped into the normal data VLAN. Thus, your phone and your laptop, even though they're going through the same cable, are separate in terms of network connectivity. That pretty much covers it for the switches. So just to sort of go through the access point, again, the monitoring side of things is pretty simple. So being able to monitor the amount of clients, the event logs. The only one I will touch on is the wireless health. So the wireless health is pretty good because, as you can see here, you've got loads of green and orange and red dots. This indicates at some point they've been having issues with potential interference and things like that. And what you can do is you can set both radios to dynamically change the channel, or you can, with the 5 GHz, you can have it actually adapt the channel width to reduce it, to thus reduce interference. So rather than somebody having to physically go in and make these changes to make the network more stable from a wireless point of view, it can automatically try and do this in the background, and it will just report it to you. So on the configuration side of things, it's pretty simple. So you've got your SSID overview where you'll create the name of your wireless, whether you want it turned on, any specific tagging. So tagging can be used, for instance, if you've got 2 access points, because by default, when you set up all the SSIDs, it'll get broadcasted across all access points, but it's not always relevant. So if you've got one in the kitchen and one in the lounge, you won't want the kitchen one to broadcast the lounge, and you won't want the lounge to broadcast the kitchen, so you can separate them by giving them different tags. You can turn on the guest network, which by default will enable layer 2 isolation so that the guests can't speak to each other. And then it just shows you what you've got for your authentication set up on there. So moving down, the authentication section is done in authentication. So this is where you set whether or not you want to use the 2.4 GHz band or the 5 GHz band or both. Specify what VLAN ID as well as on there. So this is per SSID. So you select your SSID here, and this is where all the settings are. So that cozy_Wi-Fi will get tagged with VLAN ID 1. And then for the networked access, you can specify whether it wants to be open, WPA2 pre-shared key. WPA3 is also coming in the new year as well. And whether or not you want to enable sort of the fast roaming abilities, do MAC-based authentication, which again looks at the cloud authentication I showed you earlier, or you can use like an on-premise or hosted radius server. So WPA2 Enterprise with authentication on there, so you can select again radius server or the cloud authentication. You will see that it does come up saying it's incompatible with sign-on for the captive portal page, because in essence, you want to open on the captive portal page and let the captive portal do all the authentication. So it'll want to look like this, and then you'll do sign on with either Nebula cloud authentication, which is what I showed you earlier on. So by default, it is limited to 100 users on the free version. On the pro pack, it's unlimited. And if you're using the pro version and you've got over 100 accounts, and then you miss your renewal and it gets rolled back to the free version, your oldest accounts will begin not to operate, but your newest accounts will do. So that's something just to bear in mind. So you've got your walled garden where you can specify the walled garden range. And then you've got any sort of captive portal attributes as well. So allowing users to create accounts with manual authorization, how many devices, and what to do when they actually come to sign on. So allow HTTPS traffic without sign on, or block all access until the user does sign on. Layer 2 isolation, again, is to stop users from being able to speak to each other. And then you've also got your individual rate limiting as well. So each SSID can be specified with a certain traffic shaping policy. So to customize your captive portal a little bit more, you go into access point captive portal, select your SSID, and then you can specify and pick from some of the options available. So you'll have a default, and then you can create your own as well. So you can add logos onto it, certain messages. So when you log on and it's successful, you can customize the messages there. And you can also point it to an external captive portal URL as well. So if you're using something like Purple Wi-Fi, then you can use it there. And the captive portal behavior as well is when they actually log on and authenticate through captive portal, it'll take them to a promotional URL. So this could be an internet fair usage policy in a school or educational sector. It could be like a newsletter which they publish on their website. You could get them to point it directly to that, so that when parents or guests go into the school, go onto the Wi-Fi, it'll take them straight to like a newsletter or things like that. I've seen it been used in, so it can be quite handy, and it's quite good in what you can actually configure with that. So the SSID availability is just to schedule in to say this SSID is available on these days at these times. So it is what it says. So it's relatively easy to configure. The radio settings, so you can specify what country you're in, what sort of output power you want on the individual radios, what channel width, what dynamic channel selection you want set up. And then if you want to allow AC and N stations only, so the A, B, and G, so the more legacy wireless won't be able to associate. And then you've just got the AP and port settings, so being able to specify the LED lights, the AP smart mesh, so if an access point that's supported in the model list loses LAN connectivity, it will automatically try and build a mesh to its closest neighbor. So it gives you that little bit of resilience in your wireless network. And then you've got your port settings, so you can specify on the individual ports on the access point what PVID and what VLANs are allowed across it. So that really concludes my overview of the new sort of GUI. As I say, it's quite rich and friendly in terms of visually. It's much nicer. You've got much more customizability to be able to mess around with the widgets and things like that. It is going to enhance over time, and I think they are looking at bringing in a more a darker version as well. So you'll have like a night and a day and a night mode. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it at the moment. It is really nice, so I would advise that you do check it out, get used to it and play with it, because eventually it will become its default setting. At the moment, you do have the option to leave new version at the top right hand side. And if you finish using it for the day and then you go home and come back tomorrow, when you log back into it, it will take you to the old version. So you will have to click on the try the new version beta option that I showed you at the beginning, but eventually the old version will become inoperable. So if you click the leave new version, it will then just take you straight back to the old version. I mean, thank you for obviously taking time out of your busy day today to have a look at the new GUI. If you do have any questions or anything, then feel free to pass them across. We do still have a promotion on for our trade-in, trade-up option as well for our security devices. As you can see on screen, you can get up to 20% off if you trade in either some of our old Zyzel equipment or potentially like a Sophos, Cisco, or WatchGuard. So just contact our sales department and we'll be able to process that for you and hopefully get you stepped up with newer equipment and newer security in your sort of industry. So I've just had a question from Mark in regards to, can you still create your own captive portals with custom functionality API integration, custom HTML and JavaScript. So at the moment, it's pretty standard in what you can do with it. If you're pointing it to an external captive portal page, then yes, you'll have the ability to do that yourself, because all it does is hand over the authentication side to your own site. In regards to API integration, they are looking in the roadmap for Nebula to provide API integration directly into Nebula as well. So it'll give you a much more control over everything as well in Nebula. But if you've got something working on an external basis that's already got sort of Java and HTML within it, you can try pointing it to it. And if you come across any sort of problems, then we can work with the research and development department to make sure that it works seamlessly, knowing that a custom captive portal, which you might use, especially for migration purposes, is quite handy. So, I mean, give it a try. If you've got access to the portal and have some access points, then give it a try, see how it goes. And if you come across any issues, just report it to us, and we'll do what we can, Mark. So what I'll do is I'll keep the session open for a couple more minutes, see if any more questions come across, and then we'll go from there. Thank you very much. All right, so we don't seem to be getting many questions through, but again, my name's Daniel Marsh, and if you want to contact me, you can email daniel.marsh, M-A-R-S-H, at @zyzel.co.uk with any questions, queries you may have. I'm more than happy of speaking to you, giving you a one-on-one demonstration with any of our sort of online portals and features and product set that we've got. And if you want me to speak to any sort of end users to explain the benefits of our products and solutions, then I'm more than happy to get involved with that. So again, thank you all, everyone, for taking time out of your busy day. I do appreciate it. And as I say, if you need anything whatsoever, then please feel free to contact me. So thanks again, and have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.